Hello, hello. How's it going?
And we
Uh,
have here.
the
Hi,
intro.
everybody.
Take it away, Art.
Oh my God. Super excited about today. We're a ocean liner going to that blue ocean. And I'll quickly define, you know, what it means for everybody. The blue ocean is really a very famous term for uncharted territories for business. The ocean of possibilities. And we truly here at IDEX right now charting the blue waters with building and Web3. And why don't we explain quickly what Web3 is? So I wanted to really quick to give you an idea of what Web3 is, because before we jump into the panels, before we jump to Larry, who gives really great overview. But put it simply, any physical object connected to the internet is a smart device. And think your car, smartwatch, home security system, and even your coffee maker or fridge may be connected to your Wi-Fi right now. This collective industry of smart devices is called the Internet of Things, and it's expected to be worth 12 trillion in the next 10 years. And this is not our words; it's McKinsey's, one of the most reputed industry giants in consulting, and that they believe this is the giant of the industry. So it is a truly blue ocean of possibilities. And as companies race to take every object we use in our daily lives and connect it to the internet, now is the time to take a deeper look at these connected things and discuss how leaders should be paving the way for our new reality when life feels more virtual than ever before. So, without further ado, I will push it into Larry, who got an excellent intro for us about something really exciting that just happened. Like, we were blown away. So this was a long time coming. I cannot overstate or emphasize how valuable and magical that this moment is. So, Larry, feel free to walk us through it.
Absolutely. It's great to have everyone tuning in on this, pre-holiday season live stream event that we have today. And just to reiterate, it's a very exciting time for IoTex. We have an amazing event planned for you guys today with IoTex core team members and our friends from AWS, Amazon, ARM, Industry IoT Consortium, the Consumer Technology Association, Mobi, and Protofire, as well as Jing and Simone on the IoTex team are going to be joining these panels. We're really going to break down exactly what Web3 is and the opportunities, not only for IoT but also in general. So really looking forward to these expert opinions throughout this session. But just wanted to start with a recap of a big announcement that IoTex had earlier this week, and it's something that we've been chipping away at for a very long time, as you can tell um, just by the logos here on this graphic about our event. We've been rubbing shoulders with not only the startup space, not only the crypto space, but also the traditional enterprise space for a long time, really trying to bring Web 2 into Web 3. And a big part of that is all about standardization of different core pillars. And just wanted to mention that IoTex yesterday we announced our initiation of the Identity of Things standards launch, where IoTex is the chair, with support from Bosch, Huawei, Lockheed Martin, Ericsson, Lenovo, CAICT, CloudWalkers, and other organizations. And this is a really important pillar, not only of what's going on in the blockchain space today, but how we envision this interoperable machine economy in the future. So, just wanted to break this down and add a little bit of context. For those that have followed the IoTex community for a long time, you guys know that we're very deep into these types of initiatives, right? There's really two ways to think about the blockchain and IoT landscape. One way is how IoT can impact blockchain today. And this is where smart devices as arbiters of truth or proof generators or a data source for blockchains is going to be extremely important, using real world data to trigger actions via self-executing smart contracts. And that in itself is a fascinating design space. But the other way to think about blockchain and IoT is what can blockchain do for traditional IoT systems, right? And this is really about how do we use blockchain first as point solutions to address any friction points in these end-to-end IoT workflows where we can embed more trust into these processes. But eventually, we see blockchain as an important foundation, not just as a point solution, but also as an end-to-end foundation for the future of IoT. And that is really about the long, slow grind of building standards, building frameworks that are kind of universally applicable. And this is one of the very important pillars of our future vision. So, like I mentioned, those that have been following the IoTeX community for a long time know that we're very involved in the industry IoT consortium. We've started several pilots there related to valuable asset tracking with Pebble Tracker, which is shipping very soon. Very, very exciting to see that. We're also very involved in MOBI. MOBI is the Mobility Alliance that is seeking to democratize access to the new economy of movement with blockchain and IoT. And within MOBI, we're also running several pilots using Pebble Trackers, tracking vehicles through space and time, and providing verifiable information about what happened in the real world so we can trigger different workflows and business models in the digital world. And we're excited to have members from IIC and MOBI join our panel today. And those that also know, we've also been involved in other IEEE standards. Xin, our head of cryptography, he's the vice chair of this P2418.1 IEEE standard, which provides a common framework for how blockchain can be used in legacy IoT systems. But this new IEEE standard that we've unveiled yesterday is one that IoTeX is the founder of, actually, and the chair of. So we're really leading these other enterprises, or facilitating the development of this universal standard, which seeks to define how decentralized identity and verifiable credentials can fit into traditional IoT frameworks. So all the way from IoT security to device authentication to access controls, identity of things working group is going to be a very important pillar of what that looks like. Decentralized identity used to be the hottest topic of 2019. I still remember, and even though it's kind of faded in the eyes of the media and what's being discussed today, NFTs have really taken on a large audience, but they function in very similar ways, right? NFTs and DIDs. It's all about user ownership and how we can enable these assets that we own to be authorized and used by other people. But DID has been something that IoTeX, even since 2019, has continually worked on. And what's really even exciting is it's an important pillar in our MachineFi roadmap. For those that saw our previous MachineFi announcement, MachineFi is really about empowering everyday people and businesses to not only own the data and the devices that they use, but also control the value that's generated by their machines. So whether you're an owner or a beneficiary of your data, your privacy and money, MachineFi realizes the vision that devices are owned by the people and serve the people. But without devices that have an identity and can own and control the assets, this value can never be passed on to users. So as you can see in our roadmap here for 2022 and beyond, machine identity is a really, really big pillar of what we have planned for the future. And we're excited to see this 2958 Identity of Things standard, which we're working on alongside those major enterprises, fit into IoTex's future. I'm not gonna, bore you guys with the technical details of decentralized identity, but just wanted to mention that all of the information about IoTex's initiatives within decentralized identity are available in our onboarding pack and also available open source on GitHub. So we're really excited to bring that. Decentralized identity is a really, really important pillar of interoperability and security for IoT systems in a nutshell. And we encourage you guys to really understand how decentralized identity not only differs from traditional centralized identity and federated identity models, but also how it fits into these Web3 tech stacks, which I'm sure we'll dive into a lot deeper on this conversation. It was also great to see a lot of media coverage around this. Cointelegraph had published this great feature article yesterday, as well as FX Street, highlighting our relationships with these major enterprises: Lockheed, Ericsson, Lenovo, Huawei, Bosch, and definitely more to come in the future. So yeah, any businesses or folks that want to get in touch with us, you go to iotex.io/enterprise, get in touch with us anytime. And anyone that wants to also contribute to this, a new IEEE standard, you can get in touch with us or incorporate this. This is really about bringing the mind share together from not only enterprise space, but also startups and individual researchers as well. So anyone that's interested in helping to define the future universal standard for how identity is going to work, we would love to have you guys on. So, that's my very high level overview today. A lot of materials coming in the future, and a lot of already great articles that you can read and dig into online. But today is not about sharing IEEE news. It's about highlighting the expert insights that we have from our amazing panel. So I'm going to hand it back to Art, who's going to introduce our first set of panelists. I think you're on mute, Art. Hey, Art, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, to me, I'm back.
Cool.
So thank you, Larry. And absolutely, triple IEEE is so important because to me, digital identity is kind of like a device having a passport. We all have passports. When we travel, we have to show the passport. Whereas, how do we trust our devices? And if we can't trust devices, how can we capture the value? And I think DID really solving that is helping devices find their own identity. Rediscover themselves. Anyways, we're not gonna go into the philosophical angle here, but we're gonna start with a great panel. So without further ado, I will start with introducing Anup Nandra, who is blockchain global leader at Amazon. He's a co-founder, chairman at Trusted IoT Alliance, and to a little bit of feedback, the Trusted IoT Alliance is the world leader in standards for verifiable information for IoT devices. So super thrilled to have you. Next is Mitch Seng, and chair of Testbed Console Innovation, and we're actually doing something with IIC. So thank you, Mitch, for being here. Just a little bit about the TAS Group. It's founded by ATT, Cisco, GE, IBM, Intel, all those great companies who are really looking to visualize a different world maybe. So I'm definitely looking into your insights. And we have Robert Parker, co-founder of Bright.ai. So that's a really excellent company for everybody to look. He also is a former CTO of SmartThings at Samsung, and which is a division of something that leads the smart home field from smart doors, lighting and sound systems, kitchen appliances. So really anything IoT related, it seems. So really great. Then we have Mitchell Kaminsky, director at CTA. And it's a lot, really, I think formerly U.S. Department of Transportation Associate Director. This is very interesting. We'd like to get some insights on, that angle of the world, but as well on CTA is they're creators of Consumer Electronics Show. Some of you have heard of it. In fact, UCAM at IoTeX has won one of the awards. So it's just thrilled to have you on the panel and share your insights. And last but not least, of course, Jing Sun, co-founder and head of investments at IoTeX, and she's a founding partner of Sparkline Capital, has lots of investments. And let's kick this off. So maybe everybody, if I didn't introduce you correctly, feel free to add something, about yourself. Maybe say hi. We'll start with Robert.
With that intro, how can anyone follow up? But I'm really excited to be part of this. One of the things that everyone has talked about, and I think is really important, is as you see a wave of technology being adopted, like 3.0, everyone's going to have a different opinion, and it's great to have an opportunity to hear from people different angles, because it's going to evolve differently from how everyone thinks anyway. It's going to evolve in response to the adoption. I think the thing that we all believe is adoption is happening. We're already seeing it. But in that, I just wanted to say, this is a great opportunity to see a bunch of different perspectives, because it is going to be an evolution, and it's going to go differently than any expert predicts, which I'm sure everybody already knew.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Robert. And Anoop, maybe you can give us a few words about Amazon AWS in their vision and your vision.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for thanks for having us on the panel. I'm really looking forward to the conversation and just to echo Robert's points, right? Like we come from very different perspectives. Just one quick correction though. We actually merged Trusted IoT Alliance with IIC a couple of years ago. We said, let's bring these two worlds together and do something even bigger, more powerful, right?
Wow.
Together. So that was a couple of years ago. But at AWS, one of the things that we're really keen on and kind of the strategy that I'm driving is, and I think you guys hit it up really, really squarely in your intro, right? Is the whole notion of identity. Back at Trusted IT Alliance, we did some of the early work in this space, like working with Bosch to actually get, an electric Jaguar. Well, how do you express an identity for an electric vehicle, right? And how does that identity interact with other objects that may or may not be on the same network, right? And so, now that we've got kind of KYD, your device, now the question then becomes well, what about your applications, right? Where is the efficacy in the applications? And so, these are kinds of questions that, we probably wouldn't have known to ask had we not done the experiments, right? And now that we've done the experiments, we've got, now a path forward to really double down and explore, what is actual identity. And I will say I'm really excited about MachineFi. I'm really upset that I missed the NFT drop. But, we will move forward. I'll pause there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anoop. That sounds great. And let's maybe Mich Tseng do a quick intro for us next, and Dr. Incredible, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name is Mich Tseng. I'm a consultant. I'm also the chair for the Marketing and Innovation Task Group in IIC, and also I'm heading the Testbed Council and the Edge Computing Task Groups. The Dr. Incredible is mainly because I have some of those crazy ideas, and then anybody in IIC, when they have some problem, some issues, they come to me. I can always provide a satisfactory answers to them. So that's why they gave me this title. Having said that, I was lucky enough because I start from the communication background. I got my training is in the digital signal processing. I got a PhD on that. I'm the inventor of this second order Fourier transform, time domain and frequency domain. I don't want to bother you or bore you with that details, but I have been working. I have been working with Nortel and then Nokia for many years, and then about 10 or 11 years ago, I started paying attention to this new sector called machine-to-machine communications, and later on, the whole thing grew bigger and then become this IoT, right, Internet of Things. Then with that, I've been active in the IIC, and then my focus has been how to turn this IoT, make it a big successful business. For example, we started with the commercial IoT, right? And so many years ago when people start talking about IoT devices, and there's some prediction about the billions and billions of devices, right? But then after our observation is that there are a lot of devices, but then if you just have a device that connected to the app, to the apps in a cell phone, that's not IoT, right? Because there's really no good business model for that one. For example, if you're a device manufacturer, if you focus on that one, then you'll be in danger because you're in trouble because typically the IoT devices are not very complicated. So it will be easily, once you got a great idea and you put it on the market, the knockoff can be there in the next month. So that's really nothing to protect you. So with that, we kind of go into this industry IoT or industry IoT. That's what you have IIoT, and IIC is a foundation for that. At least that we can focus on the vertical domains, right? Healthcare, right? And then autonomous driving, smart manufacturing, smart city, whatever you want to call it. Then when you go to these verticals, you have focus and you have services, then you have business associated with that. So even though the taker of these verticals are kind of slow today, but then part of that is because this financial investment to changing from the brownfield to greenfield, that can be kind of pretty challenging. But we are working on those parts because our motto in the marketing and innovation task group is we want to get you rich.
Okay.
So yeah, and we are very close to that. Okay, be honest with you, right? But maybe like at 90% now. So once we can jump over the 10% hurdle, then once I become rich, I won't forget you.
That's right. That's right. With IoTeX, it's the same idea. We're gonna make everyone involved busy, connect devices, and unlock the growth and riches for everyone. So we'll go next to Mitchell Kaminsky. Mitchell, please give us maybe a little bit of your vision, your experience.
Yeah, I'm not Dr. Incredible here. So I don't know how I even follow you, Mitch. A great name, by the way. But joking aside, Art, thank you for inviting me and very excited to participate in this conversation. As you mentioned, my name's Mitchell Kaminsky. I lead self-driving vehicle, smart city, and transportation efforts for Consumer Technology Association, known as CTA, which of course is the producer of CES, which we'll certainly dive into and share more about what we're seeing. I've had a number of different angles from this ecosystem. So I've been an entrepreneur who has built a smart city startup that was helping to deploy various types of IoT projects, from connectivity rings to automated vehicles and sensors and infrastructure and roads and various likes. And I've also been a part of the IEEE standards body for smart city development. So it's a very interesting area, right? Because there's so much adoption, but there's lots of technical challenges and interesting areas of, right, if you break down consumer, enterprise, as I think you just spoke about, and then also from a government perspective. And kind of in that vein, another part of my experience, I've served on Capitol Hill for committee and leadership, where I focused on emerging technology policy, and was also at the U.S. Department of Transportation working on connected and autonomous vehicles and advising the secretary. And the one note I think be interesting, and I'm happy to, I think is a good part of this conversation, is the typical gap between policy and policymakers and technology. That's something that I think we can all agree has, and not surprisingly, been the trend. Now with Web3, how will that be impacted by it? You have lawmakers who are using crypto wallets themselves, purchasing NFTs, are involved in that process. But there's a complicated ecosystem, and that creates a vacuum, right, for in a way, lots of opportunity, but then there's lots of people in this space who I think will, and have called for regulatory frameworks and structure. So, and then just a little bit about CTA. Our members are the leading innovators, from startups, which are 80% of our membership, to global brands, and working really across the American job ecosystem, who are building the future of IoT and Web3. So I'm sure we'll get into a lot more of this, but very excited to dig into this and appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, and fantastic introduction. Thank you for joining us. It's we're always trying to uncover something next page. What is next? And I think this is great. Jing, maybe give us a quick intro yourself as well. Please welcome Jing Sun.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, even this is just a brief introduction of everyone. I already hear a lot of thoughts from everyone. I cannot wait, for this amazing kind of conversation. Hi, my name is Jing. I'm one of the founding members of IoTeX. I'm a VC turned entrepreneur. I have to say, I never seen so many innovations happen in single space in the web, like in the Web3. So my job here is actually, we help build a foundation. This foundation will be, focused on how to connect all the machines and devices into the Web3 world. and also how to kind of accelerate this innovation process for all the builders, all the manufacturers, who are maybe they are right now they are doing the Web2 things, but how we can help them to accelerate the process into the Web3. And we already see a lot of amazing use cases. I heard Mitch talking about the community-driven economy, and comparing to the commercial-driven. Actually, we see a lot of the innovations are already starting in that area, and we see many use cases. But I think the conversation here will be more focused on, hey, what's going on, with our current status, right? And why, Web3 matters. We need to kind of understand the why, and then we understand how. And then just like, the possibilities, opportunities will unlock this, just like Art, talk about this, $12 trillion, kind of value, how we can unlock them, by 2030. I think this will be a lot of interesting conversations during this panel.
Absolutely, and we're gonna right into that conversation. So the next panel actually going to be the new internet bringing Web 2 to Web 3, and I mean that's this panel. So it's well, let's get right into it. So we'll see. I will throw kind of a general first a bit of a setting expectations. So McKinsey said that we're going to have 100 billion smart devices by 2030. And 50 billion by 2027, another report said. So the bottom line is there are going to be a lot of smart devices, billions and billions and billions. And how do we connect it? How do we understand how the landscape is changing? So I'm going to throw it out. The question is, how has the smart device landscape changed over the years? And maybe Mitch from IC, you can start with that, and then we can kind of roll down if anybody else want to tackle that as well. So I will please.
Thanks, Art. That's $1 billion question we're talking about. Yeah, because we heard about this since the starting point of machine-to-machine communications. At that time, it's about like the beginning of the 2020s, right? And then we're talking about Ericsson made a bold argument, say there will be 53 billion devices by 2027, and now we're talking about maybe 100 billion devices by 2030, right? But then we have a lot of people following the traditional or conventional industry. They start thinking about, okay, I can make these wonderful devices, and then people will start using it. Then all the devices, as long as they have some CPU on it, they call it smart devices, right? So the term of smart devices has been abused in my view, right? But the thing is that what the people hasn't, for those device builders, they immediately found themselves in a hard time, because I mentioned in my opening remark, the IoT devices, no matter how you call it smart devices, it's not that difficult to have somebody to come up with a better idea and then have some better design to overcome your stuff in a virtual time. So that means if you have something to design, if you design something over there, and then you probably the whole device become obsolete in 3 to 6 months. So yes, I believe that we will have 53 billion devices by 2027. But the question is that how many of them actually are sitting on the shelves and gathering dust today, right? There's something. And the element that lacking is actually the service element behind that, right? So when you have a device that you could put on your wristband, and then as a wristband, and then you can kind of communicate it with your iPhone or your other smartphones, then you can keep track of your health, or your exercise, the data. That people say, okay, there's a smart device, there's IoT, but no, it's not. That's what we call a commercial IoT. And the commercial IoT does lack of this service element to that, because it's a small scale. And worst of all, it does not have a financial means, right, to reward the contributions, right? That's something that I think is very important, because we don't do things for charity, right? We build something and then we spend our efforts, we want to cash in on that one. So that's why when we get into the IoT demand, the industry IoT is better because it's focused. When I need a device, it will be a smart device, because I want to do that like PLCs and whatever other controllers or other sensors. I want it because there's a purpose for that, right? So those people, those companies that are focusing on this specialized device maybe face a little bit better. However, they are also facing challenges, because IoT business, especially in IoT, It's highly centralized, highly focused, and also a lot of things are customized. That means the volume of the devices you make is not going to be billions of billions. You'll be lucky if you can get 20,000 of that, and then people actually use them all. So then, how do we overcome this kind of trend? In IIC, what we try to do is that we start focusing on the services. So we have this cycle from when you try to provide a service, you have ideation. You're gonna come up with a great idea. I want to do this to help in the smart manufacturing facilities, right? So then we say, okay, proof of concepts. We could just go to the outside and shop around and see what kind of devices are available, right? Then we will use it as a proof of concept, and then furthermore, we found that once we build it, it's not. We cannot just draw a line there, because several years back, if you have a company, then you have a thermostat with a Wi-Fi capability, then you can get somebody to invest $240 million on you. Those heydays are gone, right? So like right now, you really need to have something that is workable, and also you need to prove your value. That's the next step we talk about. That's POV, proof of value. And then after that, we thought that that would be great. But the problem is that when the technical directors and the product managers talk to us, they got excited about this solution. When they presented to their company, the decision maker, the person who signed a PO, may or may not easily understand what you're talking about. So this proof of acceptance will be the next phase. The next phase that we're going in IIC, we're pushing for that right now. We try to develop means when you do the business development, everything needs to be included so that the whole cycle from one end to the other can be connected and it can be completed. But then I was lucky that I have a chance to talk to Roland and Larry in the Long Beach last week, which we have an IIC Q4 meeting over there. Then when we have a lot of discussions and a lot of bar talks over there, and then one thing I discovered is that this community IoT economy, right? Community IoT economy, that with this like a MachineFi and those things can support us. That actually can help us resolve a problem. That is we have a lot of people in the just provide a lot of contributions in the virtual world, and also like a software domain. And then we have some other people that are actually in the physical domain. And right now we're talking about using the digital twin to connect that. But when we use a digital twin, we have a lot of issues. For example, like a data integrity. How do I trust those information being passed along? And those things can be a showstopper for us. So what we are looking into right now is that is there a way we can actually provide a very secure environment so that all the data, all the transactions inside can be trusted? So after the talk with Roland and Larry, I'm convinced that this may be up to something for this MachineFi. And in 2022, in IIC, we will start looking into this part.
Excellent. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And thank you. And MachineFi will be bringing solutions to a lot of problems. That's our vision. And thank you for the vision. So, and next, I would like to ask Mitchell Kamitsky. Tell us a little bit about the big problem right now. Is dominated by big tech. So how do we deal with that? How do we avoid this issue where it's how do small companies and device manufacturers fit into today's landscape? And that's IoT domination by big companies is one, but can they do something?
That's a great question, Art. And I would say start with at CES this year in just a few weeks. We expect 1,900 exhibitors from 160 countries represented. And I think the major point there is that the majority of that is coming from small businesses and startups. And so I think it's important to really start, diving into that question by mentioning the technological advancements and computing power has increased dramatically in the last number of years, which has helped in a lot of categories. And with AI, edge computing, blockchain, and other emerging technologies that we're already seeing, we do see a lot of smaller companies entering and continuing to grow in this space, candidly. And so for the consumer, the device, as you all know, has become smaller, faster, and more useful. And I think that will continue exponentially, right? I mean, there is certainly debate about Moore's law, if it's still in effect. But I think what we could all agree about is that computing power is going to continue to increase, and that's going to come from, yes, of course, the larger companies, but I think there'll be a lot of innovation in the startup ecosystem, and that is what we're seeing. And so consumers have also adopted IoT devices, making this market very exciting from a range of companies, right? Not just the research reports that we see. There's going to be, X billion amount of devices. We already see this in the market. So, and I think a couple of, items that, just already demonstrate how pervasive, how consumers feel about this is around 118 million people in the US right now engage in some form of voice search activity, at least monthly. IoT devices are everywhere, from smartwatches, voice assistants, and you're shaping really the way we talk and work and engage with each other in lots of different ways. And approximately 69% of households in the United States have at least one smart device, while 12% or so have, about $22 million homes have several smart home devices. So, 5 to 6 years ago, this was not even close to what we're talking about now. And I think really what the discussion here is about Web3 and, the potential of unlocking, so many interesting applications for IoT. And I think CES 2022 we're going to be featuring a prolific lineups of startups in blockchain and IoT and other interesting other industries that I think really the key here is convergence, and will continue to do so. And one area that we see is digital health, where that industry is really becoming a focal point of CES and of IoT devices. And I think it's really exciting to think, what could Web3, for instance, how could that impact these types of devices and improve our health? There really is a lot of potential there. And as I think Mitch just spoke about, industry automation is more important than ever. And yes, there are huge players, and a lot of those companies are members of CTA, but we're also seeing a lot of opportunities for innovation. So in smart cities, if you're thinking about building automation, in 2020, it grew by 42% with connected lighting devices, and we expect that to continue. We also, I think, briefly touched on autonomous vehicles, which is an area that I'm highly focused on. And that also, interestingly enough, part of this conversation is that where does some of this IoT and the deployment of it depend on other areas and AVs, right? It's the government and regulations or laws that are enabling deployment. There are other areas too, I think this will apply. And so, if we're looking at the benefits, from CTA's perspective, I mean, they're enormous. Users can share the data that has not been tampered with, that's been added, depending on the blockchain, right? For Web3, users can limit access to sensitive information, create greater efficiencies with data, and blocking transactions too. So a lot of companies are looking at this, and just to name a few, we have Athena, Cryptulip, Bystamp, Devio, and Blima. And so we have really a strong presence of small companies and startups that will be at CES and presenting this type of projects. And of course, we also have Block Party, Coinbase, Atomic Form, because I think the ecosystem is big. And a couple of points to round this out. It just NFTs, right? How does that fit into IoT devices? There's surely applications for this that can be done in interesting ways, and I'm really excited to see what our companies and are going to be innovating in this sector. And also with cloud services, right? And we have AWS here, right? Anoop, which I'm sure you can get into, but at a high level, thinking about cloud for Web3, right? That's a tremendous opportunity. And I'll finish that the laws surrounding Web3, as I briefly touched on, are still in process. So one, I would say to this community that you want to be proactive in shaping that, because though the policymakers will listen to you, they are interested in this, and they are creating this roadmap now. So you have this unique opportunity to really be a vocal part of shaping how the industry is going to look. And for instance, the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve, FDIC, and the OCC, the Comptroller of the Currency, Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, they announced a roadmap for their plans to study Web3 markets and craft regulations, but they have not announced anything yet. So, I think there's this really, there's a way sometimes with innovators and small companies about just being focused on the product. But what I would suggest here from that this should be in part baked into your product or embedded, because that you could, some of these items could influence, unlock new potential areas, or it could block them. So, I think that's a really important point for communities that are forming DAOs, especially right in governance and all these sort of things. So it's, I think, a huge area that is not always thought about, because building is the most important thing in the community, but building for application set, I think, is really crucial. So
excellent. Absolutely. Yeah, it's building, and that's what I think has been so good at. It's specifically building. They're been building for 4 years, and now the audience finding out that, oh, you've been developing all this for many years, and now it's coming to fruition. So it's and that actually takes us to the next question, which, by the way, perfect for Anoop. So Anoop, I'll throw you right in here. So this question is: we've been throwing Web 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. Let's define what is Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. By the way, there's no 7, guys. Spoiler alert. So what is? Can you break it down for us? What is Web 1, Web 2, Web 3? What is there? Are we starting to, Web 2 sparked innovation, but is it starting to hit its limits? And what's your thoughts on kind of how would you define Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 transition?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in my mind, I think the real North Star is Web Infinity, but that's a separate discussion. I look at Web 1 as kind of really coming from, the mind of, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, right? The idea that in the early days an AOL could exist. And in AOL, you could go to, an online destination and read stuff, right? You could get informed. So we saw a lot of walled garden content being created. And that changed the way people thought about, how does information get distributed, right? Now, that was really interesting. I mean, there was a lot of money made. There were a lot of companies. I used to work at Nortel as well. We were big in that space. And what was really interesting is that, there was no notion or consideration around security back then, right? Like, how did you actually protect? How did you actually protect not only the infrastructure, but the content that you were creating? And how did you manage distribution of that content? I mean, we were all living in a walled garden operating environment back then. And I think that's what, to a degree helped. But, when people started realizing that they could be contributors, I think we started thinking about, what security might mean. And then we look at notions around, compliance and accountability and the automation of all of that. I mean, that was not even being considered of back in Web 1 days, right? And then we kind of made that transition to Web 2, right? The idea that anybody could now be a producer of content, right? And we're seeing the emergence, more than the emergence, we're seeing, a definitive creator economy and creator industry being created, right? I think that's really exciting because, one, it breaks the mold of, well, you can only consume content from walled gardens, right? And so now I can go off and create any digital destination of my choice, any kind of content that I want, build any kind of business that I want in that environment, and it's all happy days. But I think one of the challenges that still exists is, and we see it time and time again, is there are challenges around security, right? And as we look at, now, with the amount of automation that exists, right, from infrastructure to applications to data sets, what is the efficacy of all of that? I think we still have some big questions on how do we actually guarantee efficacy in an environment where data can be manipulated, while it's in storage or while it's en route, right? And so that creates problems, but I also think that there are opportunities there that Web3 as a technology kind of mindset really addresses, right? So the idea that not only am I a creator or a producer of something, but now I can also programmatically control the distribution and monetization of that, that's really powerful, right? And now that I can control the distribution and monetization of that, I mean, to me, as a networking and infrastructure guy, that looks like a policy, right? That's like a network policy. And so how do we now create these environments where the policy is what we are actually trying to deliver some regimented, process and integrity around, right? And I think that's where the innovation of smart contracts is one of those pivotal innovations that is just as impactful as the original HTTP. Right?
Absolutely.
And so when we look at this now we've got mechanisms where we can not only hold ourselves accountable in this operating environment, we can hold others accountable in this environment, and we don't have to be constantly checking in on people, right? The idea that there is now this environment that is, at Cisco, we had this program we were creating called Continuous Cryptographic Compliance, right? And it applies across the board, whether you're in the healthcare industry, whether you're in the media and entertainment space, or whether you're just trying to collect data off of a bunch of IoT devices and trying to make a business decision on. Like, how do you guarantee and measure the efficacy and therefore the compliance of that? And how do we kind of remove, or not really remove, but change the mindset of root cause analysis? Because in a Web3 environment, your root cause analysis is continually executing, right? You're continually testing and validating and verifying every transaction, every event that might occur on the network, right? And so your digital forensics, which is classically an after the fact event that occurs in a classical Web 2 environment, is now perpetual. It's always running, right? And so I think when we kind of unlearn some of the things that we've created in the Web 2 space, and really think about true automation at scale, powered by smart contracts, where there is efficacy, where there is accountability and compliance that is continuous and run and real time. That's when we can see some real true value being unlocked, right? And so we're starting to see that with NFTs, right? NFTs are effectively an encapsulated business process, right? The idea that this digital data object that is immutable and is robust and resilient is really in control of itself, right? And that creates opportunities, right? So, the way I look at this is we went from Web 1, no real notion of strong identity, no real notion of strong security. We went to Web 2. We started thinking about identity. We started thinking about how these identities now interact with the broader, and unlocking the broader creator community, right? Producer community, like whether you're producing documents or videos or what have you. And now to Web 3, where we're actually truly encapsulating value, and we can actually generate entirely new business models that weren't possible in Web 2 and weren't even thought of in Web 1, right? Yep. So, when I look at this, I say, Web 3 is going to evolve at least 5 or 6 times over the next 10 years, right? Just like any other technology. But I think we, as a community of practitioners and experts in this space, do need to set ourselves to a fairly high standard, because one of the things that's going to be really important is if we cannot prove efficacy, right? Which means that we've got infrastructure and applications and resources that do KYC, they do KYD, they do KYA, right? Customer, device, application, right? We need a more rigorous, a much more rigorous identity framework to unlock, even MachineFi, right?
Absolutely.
So I think these are things that are really important. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, it's absolutely that. And Lucky Identity is such a crucial step for the next phase. And I think that, with the IAE is one of those steps where getting to the standard, getting to agreement where what should be using, and then that can apply and scale to so many devices. But I'll bring in Robert because Robert, before Bright AI, you have done some. You actually were, I believe, at Amazon as well as Samsung, and you have had so much experience. So the question for you would be, please share some experiences at Amazon and Samsung. Where are the major players are looking at it? Are they exploring it and thinking about it? Were there limitations Web 2.0 that Web 3 allows to solve?
So yeah, I'll reframe it, mostly talking about the last thing that you said, which is there are some challenges in Web 2.0, and actually they've been unsolved right from the beginning. One of the opportunities in Web 3.0 is because it can sit on the side, it can do a lot of what Anup is talking about. So it becomes another way to do many of these things, and then a better way. It can also leverage things from Web 2.0. So in order to sort of talk about that, I'm going to rewind to what are some of the big challenges in Web 2.0. So the first one, which is a little bit hinted at by Dr. Incredible, is that people who are producing devices decided, I really need kind of a service here, because one of the things that's different when you have this connected device, it generates a lot of data. And that data has gotten exponentially worse. Or depending on how you're looking at it, at least the cost of that data has gotten exponentially greater over time. You can take something that would be one of the worst cases of that, is something like a television, which goes up to 8K now, and just say, oh my goodness, that's a lot of data. But even for something like a smoke detector, the amount of data that is moving around is huge. And it's a big problem for these people who were producing devices and had a business model, because the cost of both operating that device over time, making it operate reliably, which can be sort of updates, which were often not solved in Web 2.0, or all of this data. And then the second part of the data is, by the way, the only way data is useful is if it can be interoperable with other things. And so you had sets of companies, the larger ones, built these ecosystems so that you could do these things. And these ecosystems have started to evolve to the point where they're talking to each other at greater and greater levels. So right now, one of the newest things that's happening in this is a specification called Matter, which Amazon, Samsung, Apple, Google, all are deploying this year. And this allows you to address all these different devices. However, it doesn't really solve the problem, because if you have two rules that are fighting with each other, you have no way to resolve that. And in fact, no one's even quite sure if this is going to work to have you be part of, have a device be part of multiple fabrics. It's in the specification, but there is no proof point right now. Right now, any one of these devices will sit in a single fabric. And so we see an opportunity then to say, well, customers actually wanted a lot of this, especially with newer use cases like AI, where they want to control the data. But more than that, I just taking it back to the original business problem that was happening there, is that this data, to be useful, will travel through a number of vendors. Homes and businesses are multi-vendor by nature. They have so many different people participating because they're big, complex parts of the economy. And so this idea that, a couple of companies in Web 2.0, the only solution they have is, be on my platform. You can connect to my platform through a set of APIs, doesn't scale to solve all of these problems. And then some of the new use cases, which are why you usually hear them associated with Web 3.0, which would be things like AR, VR, AI, anything that's data hungry, anything that's big and complicated. Yes, there are all those use cases, but actually it goes back to the basics. If I really want to create a system where I can participate in this way, Now, what's made this even more complicated, which has been hinted on by several of the commentators and is true, is regulatory and compliance landscape has changed dramatically over the past 2-3 years. And even if we just take something simple like privacy, right now, if you want to follow the regulations, and most devices are outside of the regulations in terms of privacy, you must be able to erase that customer data. I'm not even going to go to say, what percentage of homes are out of compliance with today's regulation. But because of this, there are these strong things that really advocate for these use cases. And the thing that goes on top of all that is you sit there and go, wow, this is all this value you're trying to create. By the way, it doesn't really work as well as the old version either. Turn on a light bulb. It's instantaneous. Go the digital mechanism. It is very far from instantaneous. So, a lot of companies are really happy if they get sub-second latency. That would be, really successful. But that isn't what consumers want and need. And they needed to keep working over time, which meant you needed to update the device and do all of these things. So we look at it, we clearly need something that's better. And these technologies do solve some real world problems. I'll give you one example with blockchain is just sit there and go, hey, there's a lot of bad actors in the world. I really want to record all configuration changes in my devices in a way that, can be shared and inspected, because basically I don't trust some of the people who might be able to make those changes, which is why something like identity in and of itself is not enough.
Absolutely.
You basically have a situation where you have to assume that these things are going to happen. Similarly, just taking another thing that's very simple is onboarding of these devices. Most of the onboarding of the devices are done through either a QR code or a PIN now that you have to see. Guess what? In the real world, people paint over those things and you're never going to see it again. And so basically, there are very few devices that support something more sophisticated in a secure way, because then, a lot of people today, if you take on the standard way that people will do Wi-Fi onboarding, it is considered by security experts sort of rightly to have a number of flaws. And so you have that. Another example that's sort of like this, which is just the easiest one. Hey, you're going to onboard one of these devices. You want to pass Wi-Fi credentials. Big companies like Samsung and Amazon have lots of these Wi-Fi credentials, and they have mechanisms where you can get into a negotiation with them, get a business agreement, and maybe you'll be able to access it too if you meet the right criteria. That's not really fair. And it also doesn't fully scale. Now, it's helpful because they're, to be fair to these companies, they are trying to actually help people get these devices on. So don't take it as that criticism, just take it as a partial answer. And this is where it leads to Web 3.0. You sit there and say, wow, I want better solutions around these things that are as simple as just activating that device.
Yeah.
And
so, Robert, I'll have to, we get the next funnel locking it up, so I want to make sure. But I think the point here is that there are a lot of problems, right? Like that currently Web3 helps solving. So that it's...
basically say two things. One, there's that whole economic backbone of it, which is sort of the data and monetization of that data, and the fact that it is an existing economic problem that won't scale in the existing systems. And then the second one is, same with the reliability and efficacy, to use others' words, of your ability to do the basic things you needed to do with those devices are also challenged.
And do you think IoTeX can play a role in solving?
Well, of course. So this is where you sit there and say, and that's why I started it with, as creating a separate channel which can do this, it will become the most relevant channel. And this is where I agree with Anoop, is it's going to go through a few different iterations in the coming years. But what's going to happen is that this has to happen. And, I would use one example as that Matter specification I talked about, where vendors are starting to be able to interoperate between devices, but that won't be the solution. It will actually provide you with an ability, perhaps at the connectivity layer, to connect these devices. But then you will need things like the IoTeX platform in order to basically create something where you could actually operate in a scalable multi-vendor environment.
That's great. Yeah. So IoTeX platform as a kind of layer for scalability. Jing, and I want to move on to you. So this is everyone has been sitting, getting tech ready, but now we're going to talk about a little more fun, exciting things, opportunities in Web3. And what can we do? Web 2, Web 3, what maybe paint us a picture, you know, what's coming.
Yeah, I want to make it, you know, more brief. As you know, our panelists already shared just like, you know, what's a challenge faced, you know, in the Web 2 or in our current status. I would say just like, you know, when we're talking about, you know, the opportunity, let's first take a look at, you know, what the Web 3 is offering, you know, to all the builders, to all the manufacturers, or the other, you know, stakeholders. I would say there are three very important, you know, kind of key pillar, or, you know, the offering, which just like, you know, right now Web 2 don't really have, and, you know, Web 3 will kind of, you know, help to unlock the innovation. The first part is, you know, just like we always have ambiguous kind of, so who will be really the owner? I mean, just like who is the owner of the identity or the device or the value generated by the devices? If we cannot really kind of set this clear, and then just like, you know, the economic model basically cannot work, right? I would say the Web3 here, you know, just like, you know, Anup also mentioned, you know, the Web3 is about the ownership. Actually, just like, you know, we kind of define, actually, you know, we cannot only kind of read the information, share the information, interact with information, but also as users, we can be the owner of the information. And in our cases, we can be the owner of the device and the value generated by the device. And if we can set this part clear through, you know, the Web3 infrastructure, and then there are a lot of the opportunity is possible. And also it can kind of just like, actually just like free a lot of the participants in this industry. For example, we talked to hundreds of the manufacturers. Those are small medium manufacturers. They not really have a kind of a high kind of garden wall. They don't really have a very big base of the devices as well as the users. But they have this, you know, kind of trouble if they will take the responsibility for, you know, all the account which user generated, but they have hosted them in their centralized server. If they will be the owner or responsible for the data, which kind of just like user can delegate, you know, those manufacturers to kind of store their data, but they actually cannot really monetize on that part because, you know, they are not ultimate user, and they also don't really have the access. So that just like if we make it clear, hey, you know, from the technical level, who is the owner? We give back the control and ownership to the user. That's a very important, you know, key offering from the Web3, right? And the second part, we will say, you know, we didn't touch a little, you know, too much, which is the composability. So here, the composability, actually, Web 1 is starting from the open source. We were very open, and, you know, we were very kind of just like have a free, transparent world, so that it's easily to kind of just like for all those builders, they can not only innovate in their layer, but they can also compose their layers with other layers, which other creators, you know, innovate, right? And so that make them together easily, they can do kind of combine them together. They are different modules. But right now, because of, you know, those, you know, giant companies, they kind of create this walled garden, and through the patents, through the IP, and then just basically those big companies, they kind of take the control of all the valuable assets, including the data, users, traction, all those things. So this makes the innovators very difficult to really kind of just like create things and make it big. So that you will see when we're looking back, you know, the AI, you know, we already see a lot of the cases in the AI. We still have a lot of innovators. They have, you know, the best innovations in algorithm, all the things. It's very hard for them to create a model which can make them a kind of a viable business. And at the end, they have to be acquired by a big company because, you know, basically they don't have really can have those composability to, you know, of the setup to help them create a business and then scale, right? And then just like the Web3, you know, the fundamental part is about the open source, you know, composable kind of infrastructure, which means just that each creator, they can only focus on one layer, which they are really good at. Then they can keep, you know, building and innovate. At the same time, they can leverage on, they will have the access to all type of other layers, other protocols, components, or, you know, products. They can make them kind of just like the Lego, right? They can just like put them together and create new things. And this will unlock, you know, such a huge kind of possibility for the innovations.
Absolutely.
And then the third part, the most important part, is embedded kind of value exchange layer. This layer in Web 2 is missing. Web 2 is kind of just like the internet layer and the payment or the incentive layer, they are kind of separate. But in the Web 3, actually it's kind of inherent. We have this economic model. So this layer is super important, so that we can align everyone together. It could be the manufacturer, service provider, hardware manufacturer. It could be just like the app creators. It could be the users. All of them, they can just like coordinate each other. The incentive model will define just like how we can align your contribution with the incentive. So each of them, they can play a role in this ecosystem, right? So they can contribute to certain things in the community, and then just like they can get certain things. So that here, when we are talking about the possibility and opportunity, they are basically, if we have this base, so that just like the possibility is kind of unlimited. In near term, I'm very bullish on just like this community driven machine network. We never have that before, and now we can do that because we clearly have the model say, hey, who is the owner? User is the owner, and then how to set up the machine network. Now we don't need to kind of rely on the hardware or the big player to help us bootstrap this network. Actually, just like a community, they can set up devices in their home, and then they can join a kind of a machine network to contribute to their computing, or contribute to their maybe the proof of presence, the data, right, or to contribute to maybe just like some other things, and then bootstrap this machine network. And for all the DApp application player builders, they can just like create all type of the application, including the NFT. And then real world location based NFT. We have a lot of people. We have just a different innovators. They are already working on that type of the DApps, right?
Yeah.
And we have the healthcare. We have the move to earn. We have the live to earn, health to earn. All those type of the kind of creativity actually can happening on the chain side. I mean, just like for those innovators, they only work on that. And then just like for the other users, right? They can contribute their data. They can contribute their computing into the network, and then they can earn certain type of the tutor,
Absolutely.
assets. Yeah, this is a very high level. Actually, the possibility is endless.
And I kind of we're gonna move into the last question because we got. By the way, everyone, stick around. We got another panel coming up. Bigger, better, not really. We all equal by panels, right? No fighting panels, all right? Everybody gonna be safe. But the interesting thing is earlier, like as Jing mentioned, as actually Mitchell mentioned, healthcare. We actually have a healthblogs.ai. It's an app on Web3 being built on Web3, and there are, at IoTeX, they're being rolled out very soon. There's beta going on. So we're getting much closer than we think to possibilities. And the next year for 2022 is the next question for everyone is, what is the biggest opportunities that will arise from Web3, and how can IoTeX play a role in them? And also, what is your predictions for 2022, just kind of generally? So, how Web3 role, and maybe I'll start with Mitch, and we'll make our way up. And
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, just I'm no longer Dr. Incredible right now. I'm just Mitch Zhang. So this is actually a very interesting concept because we talk about Web 2 and Web 3, and then the focus, of course, is decentralization, right? Decentralization on that part. Then we're fortunate to have IoTeX as one of the active members in IIC. So definitely I'll receive a lot of input and also a lot of contributions from IoTeX and other members to talk about this. In the IoT, right? Although the term has an internet in it, it's actually mostly like an intranet. Right? We seldom see those, especially in the vertical domain. They really open up their network, the internet. However, having that kind of architecture, I think like Mitchell and CTA also mentioned that we talk about the ecosystem. The term has been talking about that. But in IIC, we try to kind of like take advantage of this community because we know that we are working on the verticals. Everybody's very focused on things. And then so when we are next year, we're going to think about like focusing on community IoT economy, right? Remember the term I use, economy, mainly because I want to also kind of add a financial element into that one, so that all the contributors in our domain can be well rewarded
Absolutely.
in a very secure
I
fashion.
think, Mitch, just to be clear, and it's kind of and for everybody else is going to be just maybe one quick, 1 minute answer, just because
Okay.
so yeah, it's if you want to give any final words, Mitch, and your vision for 2022.
Well, we are looking forward to that. But on the other hand, let's watch the reactions from the big guys, because once we want to go to decentralization, then how will those major players in the Web2 see about this? Would there be when they see the Web3, do they see it as a friend or foe? That's something we need to also watch in 2022. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mitch. And Robert, maybe you could jump in next and tell us how do you see how IATEX can play a role in it, and also your predictions for 22, kind of brief one. Yeah.
So I'm going to actually move because a leaf blower has managed to move directly in front of me, right over to here. One of the dangers of the current work environment. So I think that one of the big challenges that we've talked about in 2022, which IATEX can help a lot with, is proving out a couple of these use cases. So certainly health is one area. There are a lot of others. And with some of this proof, what this does is allow people to start to ante in. People then start to take some risk. The referenceability is key. And so this is something where it's really a call to the community, really a call more broadly to get involved now, to say, you can trust, like, this is not vaporware right now. We have ways to get started and do the concrete things, and then people will build on those. So we're just doing the Lego pieces that become the Lego kits that really become exciting. And I think that what we're going to see in 2022 is first real referenceability, because I think if you looked at anywhere in the press or anything that anyone's talked about, they will not say that there was anything really referenceable in 2021.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you. And Michael Kaminsky, maybe you can say a few words and your vision, your future, and if you also in your way see IATEX potential to enter into this.
Yeah, no, first of all, I think this is really important conversation. So thank you to all for you all for hosting this. Jumping into that question, biggest opportunities. I think 2021 really was pretty monumental in terms of how communities form. And I think next year, especially pertaining to your work, I think that's going to extend. The next logical extension is being more creative and how Web3 can build, invest, and create different applications. So I think we're really just starting to scratch the surface. So I'm excited to see how communities actually will change these and invest in various items in terms of areas that I think that are I see in the autonomous vehicle space. There are lots of narratives in the media about lots of investment but not much progress. I actually think that is not only misleading but inaccurate. What we're seeing really is I think that AVs and specifically a few categories are going to take a major leap forward, especially in low-speed delivery, such as companies as Nuro, and then also on trucking with Aurora, and there's a whole host of companies there, I think, that are doing really interesting things, and I think it's going to be a major step next year. And then I'm personally very excited as a AR developer to see if Apple comes out with anything. There's obviously lots of opportunity there, and that's an area I would, if I'm building, I would certainly really be very excited about and focused on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mitchell. And Anoop, maybe you can enlighten what do you see how IATEX fit into the puzzle and your vision for 2022.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think IATEX is interestingly kind of in a sweet spot right now, right? If I look at the way that you guys are approaching what you do and how you do it, I think IATEX is very unique, right? And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think the ecosystem will reward itself and the broader community that's around that ecosystem, because ecosystems are not in isolation, right? So there's a lot of upside, not just from a monetary perspective, but even just like actually advancing the state of the art. So really excited about that. My prediction for 2022 is we're going to see, what we're seeing right now in 2021 is art and culture pushing the boundaries of business models. And we're going to see that really accelerate in 2022. And we're going to see that evolve into an environment where, it's not simply a digital and online experience, right? These digital online experiences will extend into reality, into real life. So, it's not just going to be VR and an online game that you're playing. It's going to be, an immersive experience in AR. And we're going to see some really interesting infrastructure changes as a result, right? The amount of bandwidth that is going to be required to deliver these experiences is going to be really, really important to get a grasp on. Not to mention the volume of value flow that's going to be created as a result. Lots of experimentation, but I think that's the direction that we're going in.
That's the name of the game. Absolutely, a lot of experimentation, and the field is, as Anup said, is ripe for growth. Jing, last but not the least, please take us off on your, kind of how you see IDEX going during 2022 and your vision for the year as well.
Yeah, I will make it short. Actually, I think the biggest trend is the transition of Web3 already started. We already see this transition started from the other, industry, like, the finance, the DeFi, they grow to 200 billion within 2 years. And, the transition from the game and, the collectible and also social space, 3 sectors actually they grow kind of 100 billion, within 1 year. This year, actually, we see kind of just like this is a start. And when I will say just like 2022 will be a critical year, for the entire kind of IoT machine, industry, because, this will be the first year we will see the first batch of those, MachineFi use cases. They will show to the market and start to get the, just like the users. So that I will say, the big things will be, definitely this will be the first batch, but, we will see the new models, happening in this industry as well. And we will see the transition will be happening in all industries, just like in all the Web2 kind of verticals. And here the big part is, the proved model in the digital space, for the other industry already gave, the IoT companies such a big kind of, models. And so that's just like, here, what the extension here is how we kind of connect, the physical world into the Web3. I think just like this will kind of unlock, huge kind of possibility, which is even impossible right now in the Web3. And this is the missing part. And I would say, I'm very excited to see, actually, because we already see the builders are building things. It's just like the timing for them to launch the product in 2022. So that's to me, that's the most important part. Yeah, the MachineFi, how the MachineFi, the first batch of those experiments, right, can show to, the industry, the new models to unlock the value.
Fantastic. And talking about the builders, so this is the time for this panel to close the shop, and the next builders panel going to be coming in hot. So everybody, we're literally going right in the next panel. There's no pause. There's too much information to unpack. So thank you, everybody. Mitchell, Anup, Mitch, Robert, Jing. It was an amazing experience. Please, an audience, please thank them. But we'll hopefully make them feel welcome. And yes, Larry, take us away into the blue ocean.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining. We're going to get started with our next panel. Just about, we talked about what's coming, right? But how are we going to build it? And that's really the focus of this next panel here. It's really about enabling Web3 builders and how we can bring those this new class into the fold. So I wanted to bring on our panelists for today. We have Robert Wolf from ARM. How's it going, Robert? We have Renat from Protofire and Concord Protocol. And we have Dr. Andreas Freund, technical advisor to Mobi, as well as our very own Simone who's running a lot of the developer programs here at IoTeX. Welcome, gentlemen. Great to have you guys all with us. Let's start with a short round of introductions so you guys can explain your world and who you are in your own words. Why don't we start with you, Robert?
Yeah. Hey, Larry. Thank you. Y'all can hear me?
Yeah, hear you fine.
Great. So thanks for having me here today. My name is Robert Wolf. As Larry mentioned, I am an ecosystem developer evangelist for ARM, and ARM is a computer architecture company. So my focus is primarily on infrastructure, which pretty much covers everything from the cloud to the edge. Of course, as a developer evangelist, I dedicate most of my time to building communities and the developer ecosystem where we work and support developers around the world working on ARM technology. So I have a huge passion for blockchain and IoT on the side from infrastructure, which is my primary focus. So this panel with IoTeX, I mean, it pretty much ticks all the boxes for me. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you, Robert.
Thank you.
Renat, why don't you go next?
Hi guys, I'm Renat, co-founder at Protofire DAO and Concord Finance project, which we're building on top of IoTeX. And as I share a lot of things with many people here on the previous panel here, and with Robert, for example, I was part of this group of people who wanted to bring a lot of compute to the edge and data collection and processing. So like 6, 7, 10 years ago, I was working in a space and helped to build early prototypes on fully cloud native Web 2 stack for guys like GE Digital, for example, to process signal data from various types of equipment, right? And have a digital twin actually live next to the device, or maybe even like a trained digital ear can, if you listen to how physical parts move, you can predict a failure with high accuracy, right? I was doing that part, and I was like really waiting for ARMv8 to finally arrive, and we keep waiting and we keep waiting and we keep waiting, and that actually ARMv8 saga was one part, not the full picture, but was part of the reason I left the Web 2 world, right? And as soon as I learned about what we can potentially do, it was 5-6 years ago when I learned about Ethereum in particular, right? I knew about Bitcoin at the time, but as soon as I got to meet the people in the early Ethereum ecosystem, I quickly realized that I basically want to spend my next 15 years of my life there. And prior to that, I built a relatively successful systems integration company that builds solutions for startups and enterprises like GE, T-Mobile's, Boeing's, U.S. Navy, and so on. So my story is basically about all of us, and I believe that we all do in all crypto blockchain projects. We'll do one thing: we help people capture the majority of value they create. So I'm especially excited to be here with you guys, and I would like to share more details about what we actually are building, what kind of problems we're facing on IoTeX while building it, right, and what opportunities we're seeing ahead.
Thank you so much, Renat. Yeah, really excited to dive into especially the DAO aspect of what you guys are doing with Protofire. So thanks for joining. Andreas, why don't you go next?
Thank you. Excited to be here. I am the technical advisor for the Mobility Open Blockchain initiative. Amongst others, I also advise as a business and technology advisor startups in the Web3 space, as well as enterprises who want to get into Web3. Mobility obviously is a big IoT space by definition. So this is really, really interesting, and want to focus on how we can leverage the opportunities, while at the same time making sure that people and infrastructure stay safe, and because that is a big deal. I mean, it's like Anoop from the previous panel. We were there when a couple of years ago when we started the Trusted IoT Alliance that has now merged a few years back. So this has been in the making for years, and will still be in the making for years, because one of the big lessons from Web3 is that the end user experience sucks. And until that get unsucked, there is not going to be any adoption. And with end user, I'm not only mean the end consumer, but also from the enterprise side. When you know that 77% of all hacks are because of misconfigured APIs, you know exactly where things are on the enterprise side, aka not well.
Absolutely. No, we're going to dive into all those perspectives throughout the panel, but really excited to hear insights on the user experience side and the enterprise adoption and collaboration piece. But our last panelist here, not a new face to the IoTeX community. Simone, how's it going? Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes.
Hear you fine. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Simone, and similarly to Robert, I manage developer relationships at IoTeX, and I'm responsible for developers' community growth, supporting both established teams to get on board on IoTeX, as well as any developer who wants to start building on IoTeX. And yeah, it's great to be here with you guys. Andreas, nice to meet you. Renat, Robert, nice to see you again.
Awesome, guys. Well, we're going to have an amazing discussion. And, you know, I think the first panel was an amazing context setter for this panel, right? The past panel was all about the macro trends that are making Web3 viable as kind of this next foray of IoT, right? But it doesn't answer the question of how we're actually going to build it, right? And, you know, I love having all of you guys on the panel because you guys are all touching on different segments of builders, right? Renat, you work with Protofire, and you're building some of the components for some of the largest layer 1 blockchains and the biggest dApps in the space. So having that direct relationship with layer 1s and project builders is very fascinating. Robert, you know, you're playing on both the hardware and the software side of things, really enabling people to understand, you know, at the hardware level, how things work and how that could be applied to software. Andreas, you know, even within Mobi, right, a consortium of startups and enterprises that have decided to collaborate and work on standards and work on projects together. That's an entirely other fresh perspective. And finally, Simone, you know, working with a lot of the projects that are building directly on IoTeX, whether they're network-wide services or dApps. So really have a lot of things to cover. But where I want to start first is, you know, the difference between building in Web3 and building in Web2. You know, Andreas mentioned a lot about the user experience for users, but how does the user experience for developers really shake out? And Renat, maybe we can start with you on that question.
I would say it's not easy, but the good news is that because of this interoperability, open source nature of it, basically by design, right? A lot of things. What I learned about, and I worked with open source for all my life. When I was 18, I started learning how to program in the more modern, like not like Pascal language, right? But with like I picked up Perl, and my first e-commerce websites I've written in Perl and CGI, right? And I never actually had a chance to be captured by the proprietary stack. So all my life I've been working with open source software, and I've seen the first time I had experience going through a fork as part of the community member was in 2003 when there was a content management system, Mambo CMS. It went on to become, and like part I think became Drupal and so on. So and then by the time I actually had the chance to work at a larger scale with, let's say, like in the 2000s and in the early teens, right, with open source databases becoming like a part of the stack. ARM is a perfect example, right? The open source hardware movement. It's all kind of what drives us forward, right, and makes it much easier because as I learned, basically with open source, every major problem has to be solved once. And that is what makes it so much faster and easier, even if it's not easy. I mean, as one of the early major contributors to Ethereum, Vlad Zamfir, when I when I switched and went down the crypto rabbit hole in 2015-16. I attended early talks about the Casper proof of stake, right? That's when we actually discussed it in the Ethereum community. He said at the end, like after discussion, he said, yeah, some critics say it's impossible, but we're gonna do it anyway. So I think this kind of approach, both reusability, for example, a lot of things that we're missing, we've seen missing in IOTX when Protofire DAO decided to double down and basically focus on create a team that will focus only on developing things on top of IOTX. We recognized what was missing. For example, for developer tooling, right? For you to deploy contracts, right? You need like IDEs, right? So we started like deploying using, for example, like Remix, and there were client issues, but then the Block Explorer is not the same. It's not like Etherscan and so on. So, but over time, the reason why we decided to that we must absolutely join the ecosystem and start building on top of IOTX is because, unlike a lot of people who come from the Web 2 world, right, to them it's very scary. We've been building things in Ethereum space for 5 years. Like, for example, the Oracle problem. How do you get off-chain data to trigger some events? Like, I was the part of the team that built the flight delay insurance back in 2016, where if your flight is delayed, you get Ether compensation, right, and you buy protection. So all of these things were not new to us, and we knew how to solve them. And given IOTX is an EVM compatible ecosystem, right, it just opens up so many opportunities. So most of the time, we're not really solving hard problems again, right? It was solved once, so it's a good news, and I think it's much easier than it may seem like. So that's my answer to this question. But the issues,
it's really about.
But still, some building blocks are missing. But but not Protofire can actually bring them in, right? We can help get those missing gaps filled.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this goes back to the composability point that Jing made in the previous sections, right? Not only on the open source hardware or software side, but also the open source hardware side is really starting to get interesting. But I would really love to get Andreas's perspectives on this because right off the bat, he touched on one of the big things that's missing. One of these big blocks that you mentioned, Renat, is missing is the user experience side of things, right? Definitely from the user-facing perspective. But Andreas, what do you think about overall the user experience for developers? Touch upon that point you mentioned earlier.
So it is still and remains challenging, but it has improved a lot over the years. I mean, Renat, remember when we first wrote? Did you actually write in Serpent?
A bit. I'm not writing in Serpent now, but yeah.
Oh, but it's like that sort of thing when it was basically writing assembler code to get stuff done, and you really couldn't test anything until it was deployed. So there is now, especially in the more established ecosystems, there is a lot of tooling, and there's a reason why everything that is coming out and gaining any traction is basically EVM compatible. Why? Because there is an existing tooling ecosystem that already exists that has been proven and that works. If you write smart contracts and you're not using like security tools like MythX or Bitwise, it's like you're stupid. Right? It's like you're. So again, you solve as Renat said, you solve the the hard problems once, and then you reuse, and then you stand on those shoulders and continue on from there. So one of the reasons what we did at Moby when we started building MobyNet, and now that has transmuted into the integrated trust network as a collaboration between Moby and the Metro Ethernet Forum. So we're fusing mobility and telecommunications, and we're going to launch the integrated trust network as a federated identity provider using DIDs and VCs in a chain agnostic way. Next year is we build SDKs, right? So what does that mean? We needed abstraction layers. So we build a digital twin that is standards compliant. And the very first thing we did, we built the SDK for that so that people can, and wrote the documentation. Why? Because if you want adoption, you need people to, it's like people understand SDKs, people understand documentation with easy to follow examples. If you have that, people will build on it. If you don't have that, then people won't, even if your tax is great.
I will add and give 2 examples of what we did at Protofire that now IoTeX can reuse, right? And which and where someone like Ethereum Foundation now paying for. Would you like to hear that? So back when we started 5 years ago, one of engineers that I brought into crypto from my previous firm, right? He noticed that there is no Solidity linter, right? To highlight certain things in code, right? And he's like, Rinat, do you mind if I spend like a few days writing a linter? And so he wrote the first version, like very basic linter, right? And then he showed, while he was showing some Solidity to some developers at like a DEF CON, they're like, oh, linter, cool, can I use it? And so they started using this repo, right? We open sourced it. And a few years later, Ethereum Foundation proposed actually, hey guys, it's becoming critical part, right? We want it to be part of IDE, right, and so on.
Right.
Could you please take a grant from us, right, to keep maintaining, because it's not like consistently up to date, right? So this is an example what, for example, developers in IoTeX ecosystem can benefit from work that was started years ago as a public good, basically open source tool, and now there are people funding it because it's important for developers. Another example would be multi-sig wallet. In order for any series application to be deployed, right, for smart contracts, right, for assets to be held, for both the DAOs to deploy something, right, or a number of people to control the deployment of smart contracts, right, or for another use case where, for example, some company is distributing a lot of rewards to users, right, who are, for example, plugging in devices, activating, right, upon activation X amount, upon getting X amount of usage, you get more, right. To do that, you also need multi-sig. So this part was built also like 5-6 years ago. We used the wallet, party wallet at the time. Then it was hacked. We were part of the hack, but white hack returned money to us. We were drained. But then Gnosis developed multi-sig for their own needs. Then we contributed to it, and now there is Gnosis Safe. And now it doesn't cost very much. But IoTeX community doesn't really pay those approximately maybe $20-30 million that was over the last 5 years invested in Gnosis Safe. It doesn't need to pay for it again, right? It just needs to pay for localization, basically for installation and maintenance, maybe like 5 servers with a caching layer at worst. So these are examples of that really power the actual where IoTeX community is not on its own. It's actually being funded by Ethereum foundations and a lot of other people who are building the stack.
Yeah, it's really the evolution of the primitives, right? It's super important. You know, we've seen so many. So we've seen this play out in DeFi already, right? The DeFi renaissance of 2020, call it DeFi 1.0, right? Or whatever the terminology people are using in the industry these days. But, you know, those primitives are now being forked and evolved into what these DeFi 2.0 kind of ohm, spell, time kind of forks are really enabling, right? So the primitive side, the modularity of these components is super important. And, you know, the next thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to bring Robert in and Simone in to answer this question, because the thing I love about both of you guys is you guys are educators at heart, you know, community builders at heart, right? And even if you have the primitives, if you don't have the community or the environment that allows people to say, hey, I've built this and it's open for everyone to use, go try it out. You know, that's also a really, really important part of bringing new builders into Web3. Is kind of like the warm welcome, right? So high level question, just straight to you, Robert. How do you think we bring the next generation of builders into Web3?
So I actually would like to, first of all, kind of add a little bit to what Rinat and Dr. Andreas were saying. So, you know, we look at this developer ecosystem and we get really excited about developers utilizing EVM and being familiar with Solidity. And these folks are able to just transition seamlessly their development that was going on in the Ethereum chain over to IoTeX or other chains per se. But in reality, I feel at least that if you really want genuine and full-fledged adoption, the world is headed towards a more of a low-code, no-code notion. And so when you look at, like, say, full adoption, if you want your Department of Motor Vehicles to put your DMV, your vehicle pink slip up on a blockchain, and then you want to be able to sell that car to an individual using some form of blockchain currency, the user needs the ability to be able to generate a smart contract. I can't just say, oh, I know Solidity, I can go generate my smart contract, multi-sigs, whatever. We can talk about all this stuff. But in reality, at the end of the day, we need some low-code, no-code layer to offer the consumers for this. Now, I just wanted to add that there, right? Like, now we're headed in the right direction. All of this stuff exists, but I just wanted to add that I feel like full-fledged adoption kind of goes beyond what developers are capable of, and more so what the average person can bring to the table. But yeah, so real quick, I mean, when you look at ARM, I wanted to talk about this kind of hacker vibe that ARM has here. When people are working with ARM devices, you look at the IoT space, and I want to say that if you're a developer, for the most part, you think of ARM as your IoT device. I can't think of many other devices that are out there that aren't at least ARM based. And this is hugely in part thanks to our partner ecosystem and network. And so, yeah, so as I mentioned, ARM is a computer architecture company. And contrary to what that sounds like, we actually don't build any hardware. We create licenses. We create and license out IP, which is intellectual property, for a variety of computer chip architectures, ARM-based chipset devices. These are all created by our partners, and they're everywhere. That being said, that means that developers that develop on ARM for IoT are also everywhere. Bringing these folks into the fold require kind of I want to say an adoption of this decentralized mindset, right? We are all so dependent on, and for good reason, I want to say, these big companies, right? You know, you have AWS, Google, big companies, and we are, for the most part, dependent on them. I mean, I run my Nest cameras in my house because they're so easy to set up and get going. And again, this kind of goes into the approach developers need to focus on this particular type of development, the development that makes things easy for the consumer. If we want full adoption, then developers need to come in with this mindset. I might have tangented off from the question itself because I got distracted.
No worries.
And Andreas, but yeah.
No, you do so much stuff within the ARM dev community about like welcoming brand new people in, right? The onboarding flow, you're a Discord maestro. Talk to us a little bit about that, right? Like how do the kind of non-tech tangibles, right? How did that fit into the welcoming of new devs into Web3?
Yeah, so for me, community and education is huge. I mean, the words alone, right? Like they just hit hard, right? And so how can you ever provide a positive developer experience without adequate educational material and a welcoming and supportive community, right? So while I know these two things aren't really the most important, but they are still vital to getting what you need accomplished when welcoming in new developers. So fortunately, right, like thanks to technology, the internet, decades of innovation, we have a lot of tools now available at our disposal to help welcome in new community members, to build our communities. Though unfortunately, the abundance of these tools can frequently lead to community fragmentation and or turf wars over which platforms are best given for whatever task you want to accomplish. Usually this is minor, though it's important to understand your developers and their preferences, just like you would a market for a product. Like, for example, there's no need to kick the beehive when you're trying to propose Slack or Discord over IRC, which is Internet Relay Chat, to a group of kernel developers, right? Like kernel developers, like they've been around since the 90s. They're all using this old school Internet Relay Chat. And I've tried kicking that beehive, trying to get folks from the kernel space, Linux kernel space, over into Discord. And they're just like, why would I switch to Discord? I'm already on IRC. Everyone I know is on IRC. And again, this kind of just goes back to really understanding who your developers are. Now, this is one of the first things I do when establishing a community portfolio. You have to kind of establish that full circle of platforms that allow your developers to seamlessly transition between assets to get what they need and when they need it. Developers need to kind of call this space their home, all of it.
Yeah.
From official code repositories on GitHub to official announcements on Twitter, catalog technical support on a community forum, live chats on Discord, and live streams on YouTube, static content, blogs, everything in between. Developers need to kind of feel that this community is there. And of course, the people who manage the community need to be consistently nurturing it to make sure that it can grow by providing the developers with what they need. So maybe I answered at that time.
No, it's perfect. You know, the environment is so, you know, the environment, however you define it, is so important, right? And, you know, Simone has been doing a lot about that, you know, environment creation and you know, building in IoTeX network, right? Where, you know, I think the most rewarding thing is when the tutorials and the documents and all of the things that Robert had just mentioned are coming directly from the community in kind of like a contributor-based model. We'll touch more about the pseudonymous nature and the DAOs and how this incorporates into these bootstrapping developer communities. But Simone, tell us a little bit about, you know, how you think building in Web3 differs from Web2, you know, and also how IoTeX and how you view bringing the next generation of builders into Web3.
Yeah, I can give some limited view from my side. I have education about, of course, development, software development, like C++ and even Pascal, that somebody mentioned before. But I personally have not been involved in Web2 development at school. I did just something on myself, but I can definitely say something from my experience that I think it's important to say for developers who are listening and maybe they have not been in contact with Web3 yet. And from my point of view, developing Web3 applications is really, really exciting because blockchain provides these intrinsic features to the products that you build, regardless if they are hardware or software. And maybe not in terms of quantity of features, but definitely in terms of the quality of these features. And even a simple reminder application or a basic to-do application, if you build it with Web3, it becomes exceptional, an exceptional application, even a few lines of code. And because Web3 applications are immediately censorship resistant, for example, right? And this censorship resistance extends to the content of the application as well as to the payments, if there are payments involved, that nobody can stop, not even a government can stop. And as well as decentralization itself provided by Web3 development gives intrinsic reliability to any product. Even your simple reminder application cannot be taken down by anybody. And maybe the Web2 part can, okay, but the blockchain part of your application is always available to everybody to interact with it, even to build another Web2 interface for it, okay? So, and as any other said in this panel, of course, Web3 also has limitations that developers should be aware of. I picked one, and I see that also Renat, I think, picked the same, and it's user experience to me. Because I think scalability is getting solved in one way or the other, but definitely user experience issues that are due to the early stages of this technology are definitely a huge obstacle that I think everybody of us even face every day during blockchain while interacting with blockchain products. But again, I think this is a great reason why blockchain and Web3 needs more builders, more developers to come and improve the status quo of the user experience. So with better interfaces and better tools. And
absolutely,
this is my take on like what I've learned in my short experience with the Web3 and blockchain during the latest few years. Talking about instead like developers themselves, who are the blockchain developers and who should be the next builders. I think for sure they are open source developers, of course, because we should start by saying that open source development and blockchain are the perfect match, right? Probably blockchain wouldn't even exist without open source development, without the open source movement itself. And from my experience, just in the past year I had at IoTeX, getting in contact with developers, I can say that while open source is for sure an enabler for blockchain, at the same time, the blockchain and Web3 can make open source better for developers. Why? Because blockchain can definitely help funding open source projects, for example, directly from the users rather than corporations or foundations. And we should say, for example, that token holders can influence the priorities of projects or the direction of projects, or even what features should be integrated in a project and what others should not, by simply, for example, voting on blockchain. Okay. And we have bug bounties in the communities that can incentivize bug hunters, as well as we can incentivize to have up-to-date documentation. That's been always a big limitation of open source, for example. And on top of these benefits, we have seen projects like Gitcoin or Fund Request and many others that use blockchain to incentivize development, right? And so what I can tell from the hackathons that we usually, as IoTeX, we run on some of these platforms, as well as from our own Hello Grants developers community program, is that many of the developers I see are still Web 2 developers, converting or expanding their skills to Web3, which is, I think, a great thing, but also tells us that we are still at the beginning of creating big Web3 developer communities.
Absolutely. It's a perfect segue into like the next, question, just in the interest of time. I know Andreas has a hard stop at 11, so I really want to get his thoughts on this, because Simone, you touched on some really important points there about, blockchain is a technology layer, of course, but there's also an economic layer that can be built into it, right? Bringing together people that wouldn't necessarily work together, even in a pseudonymous or anonymous capacity, or, whether it's a startup, a massive enterprise, right? These kind of relationships and these environments for developers to work together are not easy to come by. And, Andreas has seen the full scope, right? He's advised at the startup level, advised at the enterprise level, and also advised from the consortium level. So Andreas, would love to get your thoughts on, how these interactions between people that wouldn't necessarily work together, how that works in the Web3 open source format.
Challenging, because you have very different mindsets that are coming together. The enterprise mindset is completely different than the a developer community coming from the Linux side of the world, so to speak. So one of the key things that I would like to really highlight, and that has also something to do with economics, is basic security, and what people generally do not understand is that in a Web3 world, you're not talking about code vulnerabilities. You're talking about you're talking about design vulnerabilities in your economic models. And to be honest, I have not found a single project that has done this well, and that's not exploitable. I have not done. If you can point me to one, I would be really happy to. I haven't. So it's because why is because collaborative end player games are really hard to construct in a secure manner, period.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
So most of the stuff is just not there. So it's always user be warned, like with red letters, please, you put your money in there, very good chance you're going to lose it, either because you screw up your private key or not. So it's like that is something that no one wants to talk about, because it's not a fun thing to talk about, which brings us back to the enterprise. Enterprise is extremely risk averse. It's like, I don't want to touch crypto, but I want to use crypto.
True.
Right. So for example, the only pathway that I see to be able for enterprises to use blockchain at scale in a way that is actually compliant is under zero knowledge. And in fact, using recursive zero knowledge proofs. It's the only way you can do it, because that way you can comply with data localization requirements, with privacy requirements, security requirements. It's like our friends over at NIST. They're it's like getting them to say SECP 256K1 is NIST compliant is those are all details, but they're hugely important, because enterprises matter. That matters for enterprises, right? And when you see, in IoT devices, the security or lack thereof, generally speaking, everywhere, right? It's like it becomes a huge problem. And if I can manipulate data sources that are used in AI models, I can manipulate AI models. It's like, you really want to know if your Tesla's self-driving module has been compromised with bad data. Do you know? You don't, right? So it's like, these are all kinds of things that we really need to take into account. Also from a developer experience, security first is not an open source mindset, but in a Web3 world, it is a must, because you can impact millions, hundreds of millions of people, billions of people with one shitty line of code.
True. Yeah. I think that's the point is really, really interesting, that, this may be the next big modular piece that is already kind of being built out by, projects like Optimism and Arbitrum, everyone doing the ZK rollups at the layer 2 level. But there's also different schools of thought for how these rollups should work, right? Optimistic based versus not, right? So it's really interesting to see how these primitives will continue to be built out. And to your point, different categories or segments of developers are looking for different things, right? Enterprises need to comply, right? And there's more and more eyeballs on enterprise. ESG this year has taken off because everyone's looking at how the enterprise operates or what kind of business decisions they're making, right? Renat, you kind of work on this as well in a similar capacity at Protofire, right? You guys are starting kind of like a developer DAO that's building a lot of critical pieces of infrastructure for different projects, right? But
yes, correct. Over the last 5 years, Protofire has had a chance to work on building out what later would be called DeFi, right? So with projects like MakerDAO, Aave, the custody solutions. There's one of the things that we were involved with is helping Gnosis get the Gnosis Safe new next version from the multi-sig regional simple app. But now it secures this contract secure about probably, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 billion dollars in treasuries and what I'm seeing, I mean, of course I would love to support what Simon was saying, right, and ask, hey Larry, when Snarks on IoTeX, right? But well, in the meantime, if someone needs it, right, there is a way to use SGX, right, or there are other ways to do it, right? And we're actually working on a number of projects which encrypt data end to end, right? Only peers in the net-sided marketplace have access to it, right? But what I wanted to say is that over the next year, right, it's of course it's nice to have as big a requirement for enterprises, but what we're seeing for the next very short to mid-term future, right, is just to bring all the goodies that are out there that have been built for EVM compatible world, right? Just if IoTeX could reuse just I don't know, 5% of that, it would significantly really make a lot of use cases happen, right? Even without the zero knowledge proofs. I will show you like this device. By the way, this is what I've been last couple of years here in Puerto Rico, right? I was the second helium miner on the island, right? And I waited for my device for a long time and so on, and my wife also waited for hers, and we basically seen this. I met the Helium guys several years ago, right? So what I see the great opportunity is that when Helium got started, right, they had to build completely whole thing from scratch and fund it separately, right? But you know how many developers, entrepreneurs are out there that would love to have, you know, a small network, not 400,000 devices, right? Or I don't know, 40,000 5G micro towers, right? But for example, I actually, the Mitch from the previous panel said that he was in Long Beach and met with the team, right? Actually, I was there 3 weeks ago. I would love to meet. I was in Long Beach, and you know what I saw? I saw an opportunity for ITX. You know those there is this swans, white swans on a little lake, right? You can rent, right?
We were right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And this swan, there is like one person sitting and waiting and does nothing. I mean, why can't it be like a scooter rental, right? It totally could be. But creating whole thing for just a Long Beach is hard. It's too few devices, but creating a small network of these water bikes, kayaks, and so on, and this is perfect example of what kind of developer can build on ITX today and have a perfect economic model aligned to empower a lot of people around the world to open little franchises, right, and operate those water bikes and kayak rentals and a lot of things with the economic model that is exactly the same as with Helium, but without incurring the cost of $20, $30, $50 million to fund the whole stack, right? So I see ITX as a home for them to come in and get going. Instead of spending millions of dollars, it will cost hundreds of thousands, right? And now they have a new network inside the marketplace where hardware will be bought by operators, right? Where it just I see enormous opportunity for ITX. I'm very excited. And Concord 5, if you want to know what that is, and also have to go to a call where we're putting a multi-sig on HSM Raspberry Pi on ARM, right? I have to be the worker in the field, right? The field calls me. Robert needs to preach, right? But I need to go to work. So, but the Concord project is a project that aims to empower these entrepreneurs building on top of ITX with the DeFi goodies. For example, imagine that someone could lock the token that represents ownership of the wallet where cash flows arrive from rental of those water bikes or kayaks, right? And they would be able at some point, my goal is to make those people to be able to deposit it on Concord Fi and take a loan against the value of that, which may basically or lock it as basically collateral that represents future cash flows of that operation, right? And that is completely new. It's not equity kind of network distribution like Helium, where we earn Helium tokens, right, to run it. The project can raise money, and individual franchise owners can raise money as a debt, right? Not equity. So all of these opportunities are there. I'm excited to be building Concord. It's basically a money market, which would allow users to put their tokens on ITX to work and borrow against them. First, it will be just regular ERC20 tokens, right, like the top ones. But over time, it will expand and be able to basically very quickly evaluate the projects built on top of ITX, right, and give them access to what is very highly coveted thing, right? Get a listing on a money market so that users can actually see value, right? Why do you need it for, right? What can you do with it? Oh, if you can borrow US dollars using it as collateral, it's a big boost in the ecosystem. So that's what my team and I were working at Protofire to bring it to the community. And along the way, we're solving problems with how do we get a multi-sig deployed on ITX? How do we get this done, like price feeds for collateral, right? So we're basically leaving behind us. Our goal is to move forward, giving ITX a competitive edge, right? And those builders who may want to create their niche Helium network or vending machines that are you have Helium-like economics for network effects and owned by the operators, right? But they may not lack the knowledge, and so we're leaving behind two things. We want to leave the trail of tools for people to use where basically native to this. We can do it, but other people just want to use it, right? That's what goal number one. And goal number two, to give IATX ecosystem on those builders something they never seen before, right? Ability to use the economic magics of the crypto, right, for things like take a loan against your assets or device cash flows, right? So this is what we're working on. Thank you for the opportunity. I gotta go to talk to this basically it's a startup bank that wants to use HSM powered Raspberry Pis to keep one of the keys in a multi-sig.
That's amazing.
He's knocking. So all right, guys, thank you.
Thank you so much, Renat. Have
Bye.
a good one. Yeah, I really agree with what Renat had said there, and that's really the point of what we have this MachineFi roadmap for, right? Machines are the most raw form of productive assets today, right? And that's really what crypto is about. It's making sure the productive assets belong to users and belong to businesses, not these oligopolies of tech corporations, right? So, just with us, the final crew here today, just to wrap, really want to talk about the future, right? What can we expect in 2022? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts, Robert, about the intersection of hardware and software coming together, open source hardware, open source software. How does that look? And Simone, we'll jump to you for some closing thoughts. Robert, let us know what you think about that.
Yeah, excellent. So I think, something that IoTeX, based on just this talk alone so far, what I've noticed is doing very well is around standards. One of the biggest intersections I found for both hardware and software developer communities is around standards. And if we want to create a adoptable Web3, we need to make sure that we are, in fact, participating in the creation of these standards. And that's something I feel IoTeX is doing very well. Now, software developers usually want to optimize their workloads, make them run as efficiently as possible on a particular hardware. With both sides following established standards, both software and hardware is built with intent in mind. So in other words, the more specific and non-standard the hardware is, the more complex the software is that needs to access it. Vice versa, the more standard the hardware is, the less complex the software is. Snip that little clip. That's basically kind of like the quote right there, right? Non-standard, more complex software, more standard hardware, less complex software. So, keeping that in mind, I don't want to dig into which standards are better or more used. Suffice to say that adoption of standards is important and to the benefit of developers across the entire hardware and software stack. So that's pretty much what I see, looking forward 2022, even up all the way forward 2024, because standards take a long time to settle on. When you have a bunch of companies and people coming in with their ideas and things that they want to put into it, eventually they get settled. And as long as, companies and products are participating and or following these standards, you stand a really strong chance at winning and being a leader in these markets.
Absolutely. We're very, very bullish on the Raspberry Pi and Arduino space here. And it's funny that Renat was just talking to a bank about an HSM running on Raspberry Pi, right? And I think that the universals, we've put a lot of work into making Pebble Tracker a reality. And we're excited to see, exactly, we're really excited to see the developer community work with it. But it is a custom implementation, right? We built a lot of custom software. It's kind of a first of its kind solution to make this happen. But Simone has been doing a lot of stuff with Arduino and Raspberry Pi, and we really can't wait to put that into the developer community's hands with, simpler software packages, even existing SDKs from these massive board developers. But, Simone, close with some thoughts from yourself. So much has been discussed on this panel today, from the macro trends that are going to push MachineFi and Web3 into the future to how, we can be more developer and user facing, and how do we use those kind of tools to enable the next generation of Web3 builders in this blue ocean capacity. Not a real question, just want to get your thoughts on overall, how do you see IoTeX evolving our developer community, and what are you looking forward to in 2022? Oh, you're on mute, Simone.
Sorry.
You good?
So, yeah, I will give some closing thoughts. First of all, that was a great panel. And I'm also really happy that I have heard Renat explaining the real core of what IOTEX is today in terms of technology so well. Really, really happy about it. And also Robert, who touched the standardization issue, which is something very, very important. And I think we could speak about all these things for hours today, but we cannot do that. IOTEX has been contributing to the blockchain research. I think for what I remember from day one, I still remember the first charity programs that went to funding blockchain research. But yeah, let's keep on that. And regarding IOTEX, I think it's important to stress what Renat said. IOTEX started from blockchain research, and now it's not only blockchain, but it's an entire multi-layered platform that can eventually enable IoT for the future. And as Renat said, today on IOTEX, you can do what an entire other platform, an entire stack can build for a single application. IOTEX has abstracted the issue in a more general platform that can really host with a few lines of codes any of these applications today, which I think is a great power in the hands of developers. So
absolutely,
yeah, I'm not a big fan of pure finance in general, so I don't follow DeFi so much, but only seeing at what the DeFi space built on top of just some assets price, trusted prices. I can't even imagine what these applications will turn into once they will get access to machine trusted data from the real world. So this DeFi will, in my opinion, it will turn automatically into machine-fi, by getting access to all this volume of trusted data, which is not only price data anymore. And yeah, what I see for the future, I cannot tell. I can only say I'm sure that all these devices, in the most general sense, will be connected to the blockchain in the future. Not sure if this will happen in 2022, but definitely this is going to happen for sure. Yeah, and I'm the first one. I'm happy to be in the first line, seeing what builders are going to build with all this power.
Can't agree more. We're just really, really looking forward to 2022. We say this every year, but like this 2021, just like last year, 2022 was really the setup for our 2021. And our 2021 is now the biggest setup for our 2022. And on and on in perpetuity, right? It's really, we talked a lot about bringing people together to collaborate on DApps or services, but, layer one blockchains are the biggest DAOs in themselves, I kind of think about, right? So, more to come. We could talk for hours exactly. But really want to thank our panelists, Renat and Andreas that had to drop a little bit early, but also Robert and Simone. Thank you so much for your incredibly thoughtful answers. And we're looking forward to having more of these sessions very soon.
Yeah, thank you for your time, Larry. If I could add just one last thing here.
Please do. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm in the IOTEX Discord server, and you'll find me there under Fixer with 3 X's. You can kind of see my name here, but with 3 X's. If any of you all ever want to just kind of talk about IOTEX, blockchain, cryptocurrency, or ARM, feel free to ping me. I'm always open to talk about that kind of stuff. I love working with developers. There's also possibility for me to get you some hardware maybe in your hands. If you are a developer and you want to develop some IOTEX stuff, go ahead and ping me and maybe we can work something out. Not promising, but maybe we can work something out. So I look forward to working with y'all.
I love the openness, and this is really putting what you said into action, right? So everyone join the IOTEX Dev Discord. Find Robert there. His tag is Fixer with how many X's?
It's 3 on Discord, but
3
6
on
on Twitter. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah. Thanks so much again, Robert and Simone, for joining. Really appreciate it. Awesome, guys. So that was our session for today. Another amazing set of panelists. We talked about everything on this panel, right? And if you listen to the whole thing, you really understand the direction that we're heading in. Simone said something at the end there that really resonated with me. Everyone at IOTEX here has always believed that in the future, machines will be the biggest users of blockchain. not only because they're going to outnumber humans by 10 to 1, there's going to be 100 billion machines by 2030 and only about 10 billion humans. But, machines, the more I think about it, they're just designed to be run on blockchain, right? Especially those that are tamper-proof. The combination of tamper-proof hardware and tamper-proof software is such a powerful concept, right? And even when we think about DAOs today, decentralized autonomous organizations today are not very decentralized and are not very autonomous. And that's because of the human subjectivity that's also inserted into these DAOs, right? But if you replace humans with unbiased, trusted, tamper-proof, transparent, etc. machines, then these DAOs just become distributed machine networks that are all playing under the same rule set. And this is another topic we can talk about for hours. But really want to thank all the panelists today. Robert Parker from Bright AI, Anoop from AWS, Mitchell from the Consumer Technology Association, Mitch from the IIC, Renat from Protofire, Dr. Andreas Frun from Mobi, and Simone from IoTeX, and of course, Robert from ARM. So, a dynamite panel. And, just to recap something we introduced earlier on, definitely check out our new standard that was initiated by IoTeX about identity of things. It's really going to be a foundational building block for a lot of the concepts that we talked about today. Without devices that have an interoperable identity, this is another modular and composable pillar that we're trying to bring to the industry. And it fits directly into our long-term roadmap for MachineFi. So with that, thank you guys so much for everyone for joining. We're going to be doing many, many more of these panels in the future. If you have any good guests that you think should jump on to these panel discussions about, the future of Web3, we're going to do many different themes in the future. But for now, signing off, I'm going to leave you with some cool ads that we've shot that have to do with MachineFi. But really enjoy the panels extensively and hope you did as well. So we'll see you guys soon.
What if I told you you can earn rewards on your daily commute, whether it's to work or to class? MachineFi is here to change the way we view transportation. This can lead to healthy lifestyle changes, eco-friendly lifestyle changes. Pebble can track your real-world data. So on my daily commute, it tracks my motion, it tracks my GPS location. And when I choose to provide my data, and when I choose to walk or ride my bike instead of driving my car, I get rewarded for choosing these eco-friendly and healthy lifestyles. Now, also considering the individuals who may want to contribute to this greater good, but they need to take their car to work, or maybe they just want to monetize off of their data and still keep driving their car. There's options for this too. With MachineFi, insurance companies can reward their customers when they prove that they drive safely. And over time, when you're proving that you're driving safely, you can actually earn benefits for doing so and lower your insurance costs. Now, imagine there's an app that incentivizes people to choose to drive electric cars, and in that way that they're helping the environment. And maybe they can earn rewards for these actions as well. MachineFi lets users regain control over their identity, data, and devices. Not only that, it allows people to live greener, healthier, eco-friendly lifestyles. MachineFi is taking this 2D internet as we know it, absorbed in our screens, and expanding it into the world as we know it, and lets people get back into living their everyday lives. That is the promise of MachineFi.
Hi, I'm glad I caught you on my run. I'm logging enough miles that my insurance company will cut me a sweet break on my premium payments. They reward me for proof of the physical activities that promote wellness and help me avoid diseases from lifestyle choices. My smart tracker, Pebble, lets me do this without compromising my privacy. I control the data of my activities and share only what they need to make my payments more affordable. The IoTeX blockchain is what keeps my business, and that's a good thing. In the world of acute care, I'm happy and relieved that urgently needed medical supplies are being tracked by IoTeX. By securely tracking fragile medicines, they save lives and reduce costs. IoT and blockchain are a pretty powerful combo that can do good and put money in my pocket. Oh, Pebble calls, gotta go.
We all love to travel. Places unknown and places are very familiar. You can travel with your families anywhere you want to go. Now with IoTeX and Travala partnerships, we're bringing millions of destinations for your families to enjoy and travel. IoTeX makes your travel fun, faster, and cheaper. That's the best feeling. So join us. Welcome to the Machine-Fi future. I just checked into a hotel with Pebble. I booked all my flights with IoTeX. In fact, every time I get a coffee or I get a lunch, I'm able to do it with IoTX token. And the best part is this is proof of travel. I'm able to get rewards, and so can you. Yeah, my personal travel experience is powered by IoTeX and adjusts to my preferences. So I love when I travel and it's catered directly to me. We're all parts of Machine-Fi, and whenever you go to any city, you're able to earn rewards, complete itineraries from curators. They're your peers who know the city. So you can go to rare landmarks, restaurants, any place that you've never been before, complete that itinerary and earn IoTeX tokens and NFTs. How cool is that? And if you have Pebble, even more rewards. So join us on this new future.